This happened in 2018, in a quiet neighborhood outside Ridgewood, Colorado. I was 16 then, picking up weekend babysitting jobs to save for my first car. The Carter family lived about 4 blocks from us. Nice house, white siding. A swing set in the backyard that creaked even when no one was on it. Their kids were Lily, 5, and Max, 7. That night was supposed to be simple. Frozen pizza. A cartoon. Bed by 8. Mrs. Carter showed me where the alarm panel was, wrote her number on a sticky note, and reminded me Lily liked the hallway light on when she slept. Mr. Carter joked that Max would probably try to stay awake to spy on me from the stairs. Then they left for a fundraising dinner downtown. The house settled into that quiet, hollow-feeling homes get after adults leave. Just the hum of the refrigerator and the faint ticking of a wall clock. The kids were easy. Lily colored pictures of horses, while Max built a crooked Lego tower. By 8:05, they were both yawning. I tucked them in, read 2 pages from a story about pirates, and switched on the nightlight shaped like a tiny lighthouse. The room filled with a soft orange glow. Within minutes, they were asleep. I went downstairs, grabbed a soda from the fridge, and sat at the kitchen island with my math homework. For a while, everything was normal. Then the doorbell rang. It wasn't loud, just one soft press. I walked to the door and checked the camera screen mounted on the wall. A man stood on the porch, mid-30s maybe, brown jacket, dark hair. He held a set of keys and gave a small wave toward the camera like we were already acquainted. A gray sedan idled at the curb. He leaned closer to the door. "Hey," he said calmly. "Sorry to bother you. I'm Nate, Emma's brother. I forgot my keys earlier. Just need to grab something upstairs. Emma Carter. Mrs. Carter." My stomach tightened. She never mentioned a brother. "I'm babysitting," I said through the door. They didn't say anyone was coming. "Yeah, that's my fault," he replied quickly. I was supposed to swing by before they left. He rubbed the back of his neck, smiling a little. "Look, Lily asked for her yellow blanket tonight, right? The one with the ducks. She always wants that when she's tired." My grip on the door handle loosened, because that was true. He kept talking, gentle, patient. And Max had grilled cheese for dinner. He spilled tomato soup on the table. Emma always forgets to wipe the corner. Every word was right. The kitchen suddenly felt colder. I stepped away and opened the baby monitor app. Both kids were asleep upstairs. The faint rise and fall of their blankets showed on the screen. I called Mrs. Carter. No answer. The man knocked again, softer this time. "Hey, I really don't want to wake the kids." My phone buzzed. A text from Mrs. Carter. "Everything okay?" Loud and here. I typed fast. "There's a man here saying he's your brother Nate." 3 dots appeared. Then the reply came through. "I don't have a brother." My hands went numb. I called 911. While the dispatcher asked questions, the camera showed the man step off the porch. He walked slowly across the front lawn, looking through the windows. Not banging, not rushing, just watching. I turned off the lights. The house went dark, except for the glow of my phone. Outside, the man disappeared around the side of the house. A motion light snapped on in the backyard. Then off. The dispatcher said officers were 2 minutes away. Those 2 minutes stretched forever. Upstairs, one of the kids shifted in their sleep. The baby monitor crackled softly. Then I heard something else. A faint sound. From inside the house. Like a floorboard breathing under weight, I stared at the staircase. Nothing moved. But the air felt different. Heavy. Like someone had opened a door somewhere. The sirens arrived moments later. Red and blue light flickered through the blinds. When the police searched outside, the man and the sedan were gone. No footprints. No fingerprints, nothing. The officers said he probably got nervous and left. Maybe he'd been watching the house earlier. Maybe he overheard things. His name was Victor Hawley, and I met him the year before at a landfill outside Ridgway, Colorado. I was working landscaping back then, riding in the back of a work truck, dumping trailers and hauling yard waste for a company that treated everyone like they were replaceable. Victor had pulled up beside us while we were unloading. Middle-aged guy, clean truck, friendly smile. He handed me a business card and said if I ever needed work, I should call. I kept the card mostly out of habit. A year later, in 2022, I got laid off, so I called him. He remembered me right away and said he could pick me up at 6 a.m. I didn't have a car back then, so I gave him my address. I remember feeling lucky that night, like things were turning around. The next morning was still dark when his truck rolled up. The engine idled low, like it was breathing. Victor leaned over and opened the passenger door. "Morning, kid," he said. His voice was warm, easy. I got in. For the first 10 minutes, everything felt normal. The truck smelled like coffee and cut grass. Tools rattled in the back. The sky was just starting to turn gray. Then he asked, casually, "So, you get your morning sausage yet?" I frowned. "What?" He laughed. "Just joking, you know. Morning fun?" The way he said it made my stomach tighten. I told him I had a boyfriend. He nodded slowly, but his eyes stayed on the road a little too long. A few miles later, he pulled over to check the trailer. While he walked around the truck, I sat there alone. The air felt wrong, too quiet. No birds, no cars. Just the ticking of the cooling engine. I remember thinking I should get out and call someone. But I didn't. When he got back in, he smiled again like nothing had happened. Then he asked if I'd ever thought about dancing for money. I laughed nervously. "No, you'd make good cash," he said, glancing down at my legs. I shifted closer to the door. At a gas station, I went inside to use the bathroom. When I came back, there was a Red Bull in the cup holder. "Figured you might need the energy," he said. The can was already open. I hesitated. Then I drank it anyway. We worked 3 houses that morning in a gated neighborhood called Cedar Pines. The yards were quiet. Big houses. Nobody outside. Victor stayed close the entire time. Too close. His hand brushed my back when there was plenty of space. Once, while I was trimming a hedge, he stood behind me long enough that I could feel his breath on my neck. I started texting my sister. Just little things at first. "This guy is weird. I don't like this." Victor noticed. "Who you talking to?" he asked. "Just my sister." He smiled. But something in his face changed. Around 11 a.m., he said we were done for the day. That was strange. We barely worked 4 hours. Then he started making phone calls in Spanish. I didn't understand the words, but his tone sounded excited, like he was arranging something. When he hung up, he looked over at me. "You got plans today?" "Yeah," I said quickly. "With your boyfriend?" My chest tightened. "How did you?" He said my boyfriend's name correctly, and the company he worked for. The truck suddenly felt 10 sizes smaller. Victor chuckled. "We got time to kill," he said. "Maybe we get a room somewhere." My hands started shaking. I opened the Red Bull again and finished the rest. The taste was bitter now, metallic. A few minutes later, the road began to blur. My eyelids felt heavy. Victor glanced at me. "You look tired." The way he said it made cold sweat run down my back. That's when it hit me. The drink. We passed the Ridgway police station. I remembered something my cousin once told me. "You can text 911. My fingers felt numb, but I managed to type. "My name is Lily Carter. I'm 19. I'm in a truck with a man who drugged me." The reply came almost immediately. "What vehicle? Where are you now?" I sent everything I could. Street signs, landmarks, anything. Victor kept driving, smiling. We stopped at a gas station 20 minutes later. He watched me like a hawk. "Don't run," he said quietly. I won't. My voice barely sounded like mine. The second stop was a small convenience store on the edge of town. Dim lights. Old tile floors. I grabbed random snacks and knocked a few things off a shelf on purpose. The clerk looked up. I hurried into the bathroom and locked the door. A woman was inside washing her hands. "I need help," I whispered. Her face went pale. She nodded once and walked out. 30 seconds later, there was pounding on the door. Police! My knees almost gave out. Outside, Victor's truck was surrounded. Red and blue lights washed over the parking lot. Victor stood beside the truck with his hands raised. But he wasn't looking at the officers. He was looking at me. And he was smiling. The Red Bull tested positive for sleeping pills. Victor denied everything. Sighed I misunderstood. Said we were friends. Without witnesses, it turned into paperwork and questions and shrugs. Eventually, they let him go. That was 3 years ago. I'm 22 now, still working landscaping. Still in Ridgeway. Most nights are normal. But sometimes my phone rings. Unknown number. When I answer, nobody speaks. Just slow breathing. Then the line goes dead. Last week something else happened. I came home from work and found a photograph taped to my front door. It was me, standing outside the gas station that day, walking toward the store. The angle was wrong for a security camera. Too low, too close. On the back of the photo were 3 words written in black marker. You looked tired. My name's Aaron Pike. This happened in 2019, back when I was working night shifts at a rehab clinic outside a small town called Blackridge, Pennsylvania. Nothing dramatic about the job. Long hours, quiet hallways, fluorescent lights buzzing over your head. By the time my shift ended that night, I just wanted my bed. Highway 17 was my usual route home. Straight road. 10 minutes, maybe 15. But there it was. DETOUR roadwork ahead. A cheap metal sign leaning slightly to the side. Cones blocking both lanes. And a blinking arrow pointing toward a narrow side road I'd never noticed before. I sat there for a second with the engine idling. I drove this road 5 nights a week. There had never been construction. Still, it was late. Maybe they'd started after sunset. I was too tired to question it, so I turned. The road immediately felt wrong. Not dangerous, just wrong. No streetlights. No houses, just trees crowding close to the pavement like they were leaning in to watch. Gravel popped under my tires. My headlights stretched ahead into a tunnel of branches and darkness. I turned the radio down. The silence outside felt thick, like the air before a thunderstorm. 5 minutes passed, then 10. Still no construction, no machines, no workers, no torn pavement, just the road winding deeper into the woods. I checked my phone. No signal. That's when I noticed the truck. It appeared in my rearview mirror like it had always been there. A dark pickup, maybe 100 yards back. No headlights. At first, I thought it was my imagination. My eyes playing tricks in the dark. But when I slowed down a little, the truck slowed too. When I sped up, it kept the same distance. My hands tightened around the steering wheel. "Okay," I said quietly to myself. "Relax. Probably just someone local." But something about it made my stomach twist. The truck never drifted closer. Never backed off. Just followed. Silent. Watching. I picked up my phone and tried to call someone. Anyone. No bars. Of course, the road curved again, deeper into the trees, and for a second, my headlights swept across the forest beside me. That's when I saw something else. Tire tracks. Lots of them. Like dozens of cars had turned around here in a hurry. A cold prickle crept up the back of my neck. Then the truck got closer, not by much. Just enough that I could see the shape of the windshield. Black, too black. like there was no one inside. My foot pressed harder on the gas. The engine whined. The truck matched my speed. And that's when another set of headlights appeared ahead, coming toward me. Relief hit me so suddenly, I almost laughed. The vehicle slowed as it approached, a faded gray SUV. The driver pulled to the shoulder and rolled his window down. I stopped beside him, keeping my engine running. "Hey," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "There's a truck following me." No headlights. It's been behind me for miles. The man leaned forward, squinting past my car. He was older, maybe mid-50s, thin glasses, tired eyes. He looked at the road behind me for a long time. Then he frowned. There's nothing there. I turned around. The road was empty. No truck, no headlights. Nothing but the dark road curling away into the trees. My chest felt tight. "I swear it was." "I know," the man said quietly. His voice had changed. Not surprised, just tired. "Listen," he continued. "You saw the detour sign too, right?" I nodded. He rubbed the back of his neck. "Yeah, me too." The woods around us were completely silent. No wind, no insects, nothing. "You should follow me back to the highway," he said. I didn't argue. We drove for about 10 minutes. Neither of us spoke. I stayed close behind his SUV, watching the road in case that truck reappeared. But it never did. Eventually, the trees opened up, and the road connected back to Highway 17. And the cones were gone. No sign. No arrow. No construction. Just an empty road under a flickering streetlight. The man got out of his SUV. I stepped out too. "You ever seen that road before tonight?" I asked. He shook his head slowly. Then he said something that still bothers me. "I have." I frowned. "What?" He looked past me toward the dark road behind us. Then he said quietly, 3 years ago." The way he said it made my stomach drop. Before I could ask anything else, he got back into his SUV and drove away. I checked the map when I got home. There's no road where that detour was. None. Just woods. And an empty stretch of highway. But here's the part that keeps me awake sometimes. When I got home that night, I checked my car's dash camera. Most of the footage was normal. The highway. The detour sign. The long dark road through the trees. But near the end of the recording, right before I met the SUV, the camera caught something in the mirror. For about 3 seconds, the truck, close behind me, close enough that the headlights should have filled the screen. But the headlights were still off, and the windshield was completely empty. No driver, just the reflection of my own car, following itself down the road. That was the first thing I remember about that weekend in 2017. We'd driven out to Raven Hollow State Park, about 2 hours outside the town of Millridge. Just a cheap camping trip before fall semester started. Nothing serious. It was me, Logan, my cousin Eli, and Eli's girlfriend Sasha. Logan had picked the place. He'd found it online and kept saying how peaceful it looked. Big forest, a small river. Barely any cell service. Perfect if you wanted to disappear for a couple days. At the time, that sounded relaxing. We got there late Friday afternoon. The sun was already sliding behind the hills, turning the trees orange and black. The deeper we walked into the park, the cooler the air felt. Not cold exactly, just damp, like the ground never really dried. We set up camp near a narrow stream. The water barely moved, just a slow dark ribbon through the trees. Logan was his usual self, loud, joking, throwing pine cones at Eli, while Sasha tried to get the tent poles straight. "Relax," he kept saying. "We're literally surrounded by nature therapy." By the time night fell, the woods swallowed the last bit of light. Our fire became the only bright thing for miles. The strange quiet started around then. At first, I didn't think much of it. But after a while, I noticed something. No crickets, no frogs. Even the stream sounded muted. Logan noticed it too. "You hear that?" he said, leaning back in his chair. "Hear what?" Sasha asked. "Exactly." We all laughed, but he kept staring into the trees like he was listening for something just beyond the firelight. Around 11, he stood up and grabbed his flashlight. "Going down to the stream," he said. "Be right back." Eli didn't even look up from the fire. "Don't fall in." Logan smirked and walked into the dark. His flashlight beam drifted between the trunks for a few seconds. Then it disappeared. At first, nothing felt wrong. Logan had a habit of wandering. 10 minutes passed. Then 20. Sasha checked her phone for the time, even though there was no signal. "He's messing with us," she said, but her voice didn't sound convinced. Eli finally stood. "Logan!" He shouted into the woods. The sound echoed once, then vanished. No answer. Something tightened in my chest. We grabbed our flashlights and headed toward the stream. The deeper we walked, the colder the air felt. My breath started coming out in faint white clouds, even though it wasn't that cold earlier. And the smell. Wet soil mixed with something metallic, like old pennies. When we reached the water, Eli's light caught something on the ground. Logan's flashlight. Still on. The beam pointed straight across the stream into the trees on the other side. "Logan?" Sasha called. Her voice trembled a little. I looked down at the mud. Footprints. Logan's boots. They went right to the water's edge. Then they stopped. No prints in the water. None on the other side. Just gone. Eli crouched down, staring at the ground, like it might start explaining itself. "That's not possible," he muttered. Then we heard it. A sound across the stream. Not loud. Just a slow shifting in the leaves. Like someone adjusting their weight. Our lights swung toward the trees. For a second, I thought I saw a shape between the trunks. Tall. Wrong somehow. Too still. "Logan?" Eli called. The shape didn't move. But something else did. A faint beam of light deeper in the woods. Another flashlight. It flickered once, then again. Sasha whispered, "Is that him?" Eli stepped into the stream without answering. The water barely reached his boots. "Logan!" he shouted. The light ahead of us moved slightly, like someone raising their hand. Then it went out. Just darkness again. We searched until morning. Rangers came later. Dogs, drones, the whole thing. They told us the same thing over and over. People get lost in forests. Sometimes they panic. Sometimes they fall. But the dogs stopped at the stream, exactly where the footprints stopped. They never found Logan. Not a jacket. Not a phone. Nothing. Eli doesn't talk about it anymore. Sasha moved away the next year. And me. I keep thinking about something I didn't tell the Rangers. Because later that night, when we were still standing by the stream, Eli walked farther into the trees than the rest of us. Just for a minute. When he came back, he looked pale, shaking. I asked if he saw anything. He stared at the ground for a long time before answering. "Yeah," he said quietly. "What?" He hesitated. Then he said something that still wakes me up at night. "I found the flashlight." I frowned. "What do you mean?" "We already had it." Eli slowly shook his head. "No," he whispered. "There were two." My name's Lucas Weber, and back in 2018, I worked night security at Rheinwald Regional Airport, a quiet little place outside a town most people have never heard of. Flights left before sunrise, so my shift started when the rest of the world was going to sleep. Most nights were the same. Empty halls. Cleaning machines humming somewhere in the distance. The smell of old coffee and floor polish hanging in the air. After 3 years on the job, the silence stopped bothering me. But some nights, the silence felt different. That night in July was one of them. The terminal was still busy around midnight. Families dragging luggage, kids half asleep in strollers, announcements echoing through the building. But every time I walked past Gate 4, something felt slightly wrong, like someone was watching. You know that feeling where your shoulders tense before you even know why. I ignored it. Around 12:15, I went to the bakery for my break, bought a chocolate bar and an energy drink, sat at one of those cold metal tables near the windows. I was halfway through a video on my phone when something made me turn around. A man stood behind me, black rain jacket, hood down, maybe mid-40s. He wasn't looking at the menu or the display case. He was looking straight at me, not blinking, just watching. We held eye contact for a few seconds. Then I looked back at my phone like it didn't matter. Airports are full of weird people. You learn not to react. But when I came out of the restroom a minute later, he was still there, about 50 meters down the hallway, head tilted slightly, watching again. The moment he saw I'd noticed him, he turned and walked into a service corridor. No hurry, no noise, just gone. The rest of the shift dragged by. I checked doors, walked empty gates, watched the camera monitors, but I kept thinking about that guy. Around 5 a.m., my phone finally died. No big deal. My apartment was a 15-minute walk away. The morning air outside felt cool and damp. Streetlights still on. No traffic yet. Halfway home, I remembered the power bank in my backpack, plugged my phone in, and kept walking. A few minutes later, the screen lit up. A message I'd never seen before. Unknown tracker detected moving with you. I frowned. Distance traveled, 800 meters. I didn't own a tracker. Another vibration. 600 meters. The street was empty. 500 meters. I turned slowly, scanning the road behind me. Nothing. Just fog drifting under the lamps. 400 meters. My stomach tightened. Maybe someone nearby had luggage with a tracker. Maybe it was a glitch. That's what I kept telling myself. Then it dropped to 300, and it kept dropping. I started walking faster, 200 meters. My chest felt tight now. I broke into a jog. 120 meters. My building was just ahead, 70 meters. I ran. The key slipped in my sweaty hand before I finally got the door open and slammed it shut behind me. The hallway was empty. My phone vibrated again, 40 meters. Then 15, then 5. I stared at the screen. I checked the stairwell. Nothing. No one outside. Eventually, I convinced myself it had to be a bug. I'd been awake all night. My brain was fried. I showered, changed clothes, lay down on the bed, put on one of those horror narration videos I always listen to before sleeping. I remembered the voice talking. Then everything went black. Something woke me. No idea how much later. The room was dark except for the faint glow of my phone. Another notification waited on the screen. Tracker detected nearby. The distance, 2 meters. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. 2 meters meant inside the room. My eyes adjusted slowly. And that's when I saw him, standing at the foot of the bed, black rain jacket. Same man from the airport. Watching me again. My throat made this awful choking sound. He stepped back calmly, opened the bedroom door, and disappeared into the hallway. By the time I reached the door, the apartment was empty. No forced entry. No open windows. Nothing. The police searched everything. One officer found a single damp footprint on the floor near my bed. Just one. They never found the tracker either. Not that night. I stayed with my sister for a few days after that. When I finally returned to the apartment, we emptied my backpack on the kitchen table. My sister noticed something strange in the inner lining. A tiny cut in the fabric. Inside it was a small white disc, an Apple tracker. Hidden so carefully, I'd never felt it. The police took it as evidence. They asked if anyone might want to follow me. I told them no. And that was the truth. At least, I think it was. I still work night shifts. Different airport now. Different city. But sometimes, when my phone vibrates in my pocket, I feel that same tight feeling in my chest. A few weeks ago, I got another alert. Unknown tracker detected nearby. Distance, 3 meters. I searched my bag, my jacket, my car. Nothing. The signal disappeared after a few minutes. Probably a mistake. Probably. Still, every now and then, when I'm walking home late, I hear footsteps behind me. Slow, unhurried, keeping the same distance. And once, just once, when I turned around, I could have sworn I saw a man standing under the streetlight, black rain jacket, head slightly tilted, watching me, like he'd never really left. I was 19 this summer. Caleb convinced us to go back. We were part of a small volunteer rescue group outside a town called Alder Ridge. Most weekends we trained in forests or old buildings, learning navigation and rope work. Caleb liked pushing things further. That night he wanted something different. There was an abandoned Cold War bunker outside town, concrete buried in the hillside, sealed for decades after the military pulled out in the late 80s. Locals called it Bunker 12. According to Caleb, there was still a maintenance shaft on the far side. Easy climb, he said, tossing a coil of rope into the truck. We go in, walk the tunnels, come back out before sunrise. There were 5 of us: Caleb, my cousin Ryan, a quiet girl named Leah, a guy from the next town named Matt, and me. We parked 2 bends down the road and killed the headlights. No one talked much after that. The bunker was almost invisible under the trees. Just a long concrete wall and a rusted metal vent sticking out of the ground like a broken pipe. Caleb found the shaft behind a collapsed fence. A narrow opening in the wall, maybe 20 feet up. Old climbing bolts were already there. See, he said. Told you. One by one we clipped onto the rope and climbed. The stone was slick with moss. Cold water ran down the wall and soaked through my gloves. Halfway up I glanced at the road just as a truck passed. The headlights swept across the trees. For a second, I thought I saw someone standing near the base of the wall. But the light moved on. When I looked again, nothing was there. Inside the bunker, the temperature dropped instantly. The air felt stale, like it had been sitting still for years. It smelled like damp concrete and old metal. And it was completely black. We'd agreed on one rule: no flashlights. Just like during rescue drills. Move by touch, stay calm, trust your memory. The tunnels were narrow. My shoulders brushed both sides as I walked. Every step echoed down the corridor and came back a second later, like someone following behind. Caleb had a plan. I would go ahead and wait at a side junction to guide the others. When they reached the corner, I'd whisper directions and send them deeper into the bunker. Simple. I counted my steps through the dark, found the junction, and crouched against the wall. Then I waited. At first, the silence felt normal. Then it started feeling heavy. You notice strange things when you sit in the dark long enough. The way your own breathing sounds too loud. The way fabric rubs against your arm when you shift. There was also a faint draft in the tunnel. Every few seconds it slid past my legs, like someone slowly walking by. I must have been there 20 minutes when I saw the light. Tiny. Floating at the far end of the corridor. At first, I thought Caleb had broken the rule and brought a candle. The light bobbed gently as it moved closer. But the color was wrong. It wasn't yellow. It was pale white. Like a reflection. I leaned forward, waiting to hear footsteps. Nothing. The light drifted closer. 10 feet away. 5. Then it vanished. Just gone. The hallway swallowed it. I sat there staring into the dark, expecting someone to laugh or whisper. Instead, I heard something right in front of me. A soft scrape, cloth against concrete. Then warm air touched my face. Someone was standing there, close enough that I could smell sweat and damp soil. I froze. Whoever it was stopped moving too. For a few seconds, we shared the same tiny pocket of air in the darkness. No breathing. No footsteps. Nothing. My chest started burning. Right when I couldn't hold my breath anymore, the warmth shifted slightly and drifted away to my left. The air turned cold again. A moment later, I heard boots approaching from that direction. Real footsteps this time. Heavy. Ryan's voice came out of the darkness. "That you, Nate?" Relief hit so hard my knees almost buckled. "Yeah," I whispered. "Go straight. First tunnel on the right." He passed me, his shoulder brushing mine. Before he disappeared, I asked quietly, "Hey, who climbed in first tonight?" Ryan sounded confused. "You did?" I sat there a long time after that. Eventually, the others came through. Leah, Matt, Caleb last. None of them had lights. None of them had seen anything. And according to all three of them, I had been the first person inside the bunker. When the last of them passed, I started back toward the shaft. My steps echoed down the tunnel. Step, step, and another step behind me. Always one beat late, I stopped walking. The extra step didn't. It stopped a second later. I climbed the rope faster than I ever had in training. When I pulled myself over the edge, the sky was turning gray with morning. The others were already near the truck, laughing about bruised hands and wet boots. Ryan asked why I looked sick. I told him the air in the bunker made me dizzy. Maybe it did. But sometimes I still think about something Caleb said on the drive home. He was counting gear in the back seat. Then he paused. "Hey," he said slowly, "which one of you was already inside when we climbed in?" No one answered, because none of us had been. My name's Marissa. I was 17 that summer, working night shifts at Ridgeview Stadium in 2019. Small city in the Midwest. Nothing special about the place. Just a soccer stadium surrounded by cheap bars, cracked sidewalks, and a parking lot that smelled like hot asphalt and stale beer. My job was simple. Clear plates, refill forks, pour sodas when the line got long. Big games were chaos. Hundreds of people packed into the private lounge, yelling over each other, while the smell of fried food and spilled cola hung in the air. Halftime was always the worst. That's when the line at the soda machine stretched halfway across the room. I was pouring drinks as fast as I could when the man stepped forward. He looked old, maybe 60, maybe older. His skin had that gray color people get when they spend too much time indoors. His jacket looked too heavy for the warm night outside. "Coke," he said. His voice sounded dry, like it scraped his throat on the way out. I filled the cup and slid it across. Most people grabbed their drink and move along. He didn't. He just stood there. I pointed down the counter. "Straws are over there." Still nothing. Then I realized he was staring straight at my face. Not smiling, not angry, just studying me. After a few seconds, he picked up the drink and walked away. I forgot about him almost immediately. When you work in a stadium, you see thousands of faces. They blur together. But 10 minutes later, he came back. The line had thinned out by then. "Need a refill?" I asked. He leaned closer to the counter. "How old are you?" Something about the way he said it made my stomach tighten. "I'm not allowed to say," I replied, forcing a quick smile. His eyes dropped to my name tag. "Marissa," he murmured. He smiled then. His teeth were crooked and yellow, like broken piano keys. "Pretty name. People flirt with the staff all the time. Usually it's harmless. Drunk guys trying to be funny. But this felt different." He didn't laugh, didn't wink. He just kept staring. Eventually, he walked away again. I told my coworkers in the kitchen later. They joked about it, said every stadium had its share of creeps. I laughed with him, but something about the guy stuck in my head. Mostly his eyes. They looked patient, like he wasn't in a hurry. After the game ended, we started cleanup. The stadium emptied fast, leaving behind the usual mess of plastic cups and greasy napkins. Downstairs, near the service hallway, I saw him again. He was standing by the restroom doors, not using them, just watching us. The game had ended almost half an hour earlier. Most fans were already gone. For a second our eyes met. Then he turned and walked down the corridor. Something cold slid through my chest. I told myself it was nothing. I clocked out around 10:40 and headed toward the employee parking lot behind the stadium. The crowd noise faded the farther I walked. Soon the only sounds were distant traffic and the hum of a streetlight above the alley. The air smelled like old grease from the restaurants nearby. I dug through my bag for my keys. That's when I saw him, standing under the streetlight, the same jacket, same still posture, waiting. My chest tightened. I started walking faster. Behind me, I heard footsteps, slow, matching my pace. The parking lot was nearly empty now. Just a few cars and long shadows stretching across the pavement. My car was 20 feet away. I reached it, hands shaking as I fumbled with my keys. Then a hand landed on my shoulder, cold, heavy. I turned. He was right behind me. Up close, I noticed something strange about his breath. It smelled metallic, like old coins. He grabbed my wrist and pulled. Hard. The parking lot spun as he dragged me toward the darker edge near the dumpsters. I fought him, scratched his arm. My nails left thin red lines across his skin. He didn't react, didn't even grunt. That's when two men turned the corner from the neighboring lot. They froze for half a second, confused. "Help me." I screamed. Everything happened fast after that. One of them rushed forward and shoved the man off me. The other pulled me back toward the car. I remember sitting on the pavement, dialing 911, while my hands shook so badly I could barely hold the phone. Police arrived within minutes. They took the man away in cuffs. He never resisted, never spoke. Just watched me the whole time they pushed him into the cruiser. A week later, the police called. They said his fingerprints matched a suspect connected to 2 attempted kidnappings near other stadiums. Both times the victims had escaped. Both times the man had vanished before police arrived. But there was something else. Something they couldn't explain. The officer asked me a strange question before hanging up. He asked if I had ever met the man before that night. I told him no. But the truth is, I'm not completely sure. Because later, when I cleaned out my work bag, I found something at the bottom. A photograph. Old, creased, black and white. It showed a stadium parking lot. And standing near the edge of the picture was a girl who looked a lot like me. Same hair, same face, same uniform. On the back, someone had written a date. July 14th, 1996. 23 years before I was even born. And right behind the girl in the photo was the same man, watching her. Back in 2008, I was 16 and living in a tiny town called Ridge Hollow. Nothing really happened there. A grocery store, a gas station, one sad movie theater that never had anything new. That summer, I started hanging out with Caleb. We weren't officially dating yet. Just 2 bored teenagers looking for somewhere to go after dark. Ridge Hollow sat next to a canyon with a river cutting through it. Locals hiked the trails all the time. There were 2 bridges out there. One small wooden footbridge most people used. And then there was the Iron Crest Bridge. Tall, massive. You could see it from half the county. People came for the view. But people also came there for other reasons. Even as a kid, I'd heard the stories. Too many. One evening in late October, Caleb and I decided to walk the trail to the smaller bridge. It was around 6 when we parked at the trailhead. The canyon swallowed light fast. The sun was still up somewhere above us, but down on the trail, everything was already turning gray. The air smelled damp, like wet stone and leaves that had been sitting too long. We walked maybe 10 minutes before I noticed how quiet it had gotten. No birds, no insects. Just the river somewhere below us, moving slowly through the canyon. I rubbed my arms. "You hear that?" I asked. Caleb glanced around. "Hear what?" "That's the thing," I said. "Nothing." He laughed it off and kept walking. But something in my chest had already started tightening. The trail curved toward the small bridge. Normally, you could see it from a distance. That night, the darkness swallowed everything. By the time we reached the turn, it was almost completely black. Caleb pulled out his phone and turned on the flashlight. I did the same. The beams barely reached 10 feet ahead of us. The rest of the trail just disappeared into thick darkness. That's when I saw it. A shape, standing just off the path near the start of the bridge. At first, I thought it was a tree. Then my light moved a little higher. It wasn't a tree. It was a man, or something shaped like one. He stood with his back to us, facing the canyon, completely still. The beam of my flashlight shook as I moved it across his shoulders. He was huge, easily 7 feet tall, maybe more. Broad back, brown flannel shirt, dark pants. But the longer I looked, the more something about him felt wrong. His arms hung too low, almost to his knees. His head looked round. Not like a normal head, more like a smooth sphere sitting on his shoulders. His hair stuck straight up in stiff brown spikes. He didn't move, didn't react to the lights, didn't acknowledge us at all. The smell hit me then, faint, metallic, like old pennies. My stomach twisted. I whispered, "Caleb, do you see him?" "Yeah," he said quietly. We stood there like that for a long time. No wind, no sound, just the river somewhere far below. Finally, Caleb called out, "Hey, man, you okay?" The figure didn't answer, but after a few seconds, it started to move, slowly, turning toward us, not with a normal shift of weight, more like the top half of his body rotated first. Then the rest followed. Something inside me snapped. "Don't," I said. But Caleb was already stepping forward. The figure kept turning. And I swear, for just a second, the flashlight hit where its face should have been. There was something there, but not eyes, not a mouth. Just smooth, pale skin, like a blank mask stretched too tight. I grabbed Caleb's arm. "Run!" We ran. Branches whipped past us as we tore down the trail. Gravel slid under our shoes. My flashlight bounced wildly across the ground. Behind us, nothing. No footsteps, no voice. Just that heavy silence chasing us through the canyon. When we finally reached the car, Caleb slammed the doors and locked them. Neither of us spoke during the drive back. We didn't even look at each other. 3 days later, we went back. Daytime, bright sun. 4 other friends with us. I told myself we had imagined it. People see weird things in the dark all the time. But when we reached the spot where the figure had stood, I felt that same cold pressure in my chest. The ground off the trail dropped steeply down a small ledge, about 4 feet lower than the path. Caleb looked at it, then at me. Neither of us said anything for a while. Finally he whispered, "If he was standing down there." I finished the thought. He wasn't 7 feet tall, more like 10. We never found footprints. No broken branches. Nothing. Just dirt and leaves, like nobody had ever been there. I tried to forget about it. Mostly I did, until last year. I was cleaning out old boxes when I found my phone from high school. The battery barely worked, but somehow it turned on. There were only a few photos left on it. One was from that night. I don't remember taking it. The timestamp said 6:58 p.m. just minutes before we ran. It was a blurry picture of the trail, the bridge, and the shape standing beside it. But now the figure wasn't facing the canyon. It was facing us. Even through the blur you could tell. The head tilted slightly, like it was curious, like it knew the photo was being taken. And just behind it, on the trail where Caleb and I had been standing, there was another shadow, tall, thin, arms hanging too long, facing the bridge. For weeks, the music next door had been shaking the walls of my little rental house in Ridgway, Colorado, a quiet mountain town that mostly smelled like pine trees and cold air. I'd moved there in late 2019, hoping for a quiet place to work remotely and keep my life simple. It was just me and my gray cat, Juniper, and the man in the duplex next door. His name was Calvin, I think. I only saw him once the day I moved in. Tall guy, pale, barely spoke. After that, the only sign he existed was the music, heavy bass, every night, sometimes until 3 in the morning. The house would vibrate like a truck engine was idling in the walls. I tried knocking a few times. No answer. Eventually, I filed a noise complaint online. Nothing dramatic, just something polite to get some sleep. The next morning I walked outside and felt my stomach drop. My car sat crooked in the driveway. All 4 tires were sliced open. Not punctured, not flattened, cut, clean, deliberate slashes across the rubber. The sheriff who came out looked bored. He took a few photos, wrote a few notes, and shrugged. Hard to prove who did something like this. That night, the music got louder. A week later, Juniper disappeared. She was an indoor cat, but she liked sitting on the back steps when the weather was warm. That evening, I left the door cracked while I made dinner. When I called for her, the yard was empty. I searched the street with a flashlight until almost midnight. Nothing. No fur. No tracks. Just wind moving through dry leaves. 7 days later, I found an envelope in my mailbox. No stamp. Just my name written in thick, shaky letters. Inside was a single line. "Next time it's you." The deputies came again, bagged the letter, walked around the property like they were checking off a routine. No fingerprints, no cameras on the street, no witnesses. One of them told me to keep an eye out, so I bought cameras. Cheap ones. 2 outside, 1 by the porch. Motion alerts that buzzed my phone all night. The first few nights were nothing but raccoons. Then one morning I checked the backyard camera. The screen was black. Outside, the camera itself was gone. Not broken, removed. The screws were still sitting neatly in the siding. After that, barely slept. I started keeping a baseball bat beside the couch. Every creak in the house made my shoulders tighten. Then one morning, just before sunrise, I heard something from the attic. A soft shift, like something sliding across wood. I climbed the ladder with a flashlight. The attic smelled stale. Dusty insulation, old wood, something faintly metallic. At first I didn't see anything. Then my light landed on a small shape near the air vent. A collar, Juniper's. The clasp had been snapped open. I sat there on the attic floor for a long time staring at it, trying to understand how it got there. The attic hatch stayed locked from inside the house. No broken windows. No footprints. Nothing. The detective assigned to the case visited a few days later. Older guy. Tired eyes. "We need someone on camera," he told me. I nodded, but something about the attic bothered me more than the threat. Because I couldn't remember the last time I'd actually been up there. And yet the dust around the collar looked disturbed, like someone had been kneeling there. A week later I came home and saw a white van parked beside Calvin's duplex. He stood in the doorway, talking with 2 men hauling large speakers inside. When he noticed me watching, he raised his hand and waved slowly. He smiled like we were neighbors sharing a joke. That night I started packing. At 3:12 a.m., my phone buzzed. Porch camera alert. I opened the feed. Someone stood just beyond the porch light. Only a dark outline. The figure lifted something toward the camera. It looked like a key, or maybe a blade. Then they stepped back into the darkness. I sent the clip to the detective. He said the face was covered. Nothing they could use. The next morning, I found a screwdriver under my welcome mat. I didn't touch it. 2 days later, I noticed fresh scratches around my front door lock. That was enough. I sold the house fast, packed everything I owned, and moved to an apartment complex with security gates and cameras in the halls. That should have been the end of it. But 3 weeks after I moved, the detective called. They'd searched Calvin's place. He'd left town suddenly. No forwarding address. Inside his duplex, they found stacks of speakers, tools, and several old envelopes. Each one had a different name written on it, different houses, different streets. Then he said something that still sits wrong with me. They never found Juniper, but they did find something else. The attic camera I'd installed, still in its box, unopened. I told him that wasn't possible. I remembered setting it up myself. I remembered climbing into the attic, testing the angle, seeing the vent, the empty floor, the place where the collar was lying. But when I hang up the phone, I realize something I can't explain. I never checked the attic in my new apartment. And some nights, when the building goes quiet, I swear I hear something shifting above the ceiling. Soft, slow, like someone moving carefully in the dark. I didn't open the bedroom door because I heard something. I opened it because the silence suddenly felt crowded. It was 2014, back when I had just moved to a quiet town called Red Hollow. I was 22 and living in the basement unit of an old split house on Alder Street. Cheap rent, low ceilings, and a landlord who mostly stayed out of sight. The kind of place where the pipes knocked at night and the air always smelled faintly damp. For a while, it was just me down there. My name's Daniel, and at the time I worked late shifts at a grocery store. Most nights I came home around midnight, microwaved something awful, and watched movies until I was too tired to stay awake. I had a habit of putting on horror movies before bed. I don't know why. Maybe because when the movie ended, the apartment felt even quieter. That night I watched one about someone being followed inside their own home. By the time it ended, the apartment felt colder than usual. Not freezing, just enough that I pulled the blanket tighter around my shoulders. The upstairs tenant, a guy named Mark, was out. His truck wasn't in the driveway when I got home, which meant I should have been alone. But around 2 a.m., I started hearing things. At first, it was small. A soft tap somewhere in the apartment, and the slow creak of floorboards settling. Old houses do that. I told myself that twice. Then I heard something that didn't sound like a house. A footstep. Not above me. Inside. My hands started shaking before my brain caught up with what that meant. I muted the TV and just sat there listening. The refrigerator hummed. A pipe clicked. Then another step. Slow. Careful. The hallway outside my bedroom was narrow, barely wide enough for 2 people to pass each other. At the end of it, the space opened into the living room and kitchen. I stared at the bedroom door for a long time before finally getting up. My palm was sweating on the doorknob. When I opened it, the hallway was dark, except for the faint gray light coming through the living room windows. And someone was standing there. A woman. She was at the far end of the hallway, half in shadow, half in moonlight. Pale face, dark hair hanging around her shoulders, completely still, just watching me. For a few seconds, neither of us moved. I remember noticing strange things. Her shoes were muddy. One of her sleeves looked torn. There was a smell drifting down the hallway, too. Something metallic and stale. Then she started stepping backward, slowly. She never turned around. just kept staring at me while she moved toward the living room. My chest tightened. My brain kept trying to decide if this was real or if I was still half asleep. "Hey," I said, but my voice cracked. She didn't answer. I slammed the bedroom door and locked it. For a few seconds there was nothing. Then sudden footsteps running across the living room. The short staircase leading outside rattled under the weight of someone sprinting up it. A door upstairs slammed so hard the walls shook. And then the house went quiet again. I stayed in my room for nearly 15 minutes before I finally stepped back into the hallway with my phone light on. The apartment was empty. The front door was closed, but not fully latched. I locked it and pushed a chair against it before going back to my room. The next morning, I called the landlord. About an hour later, Mark came downstairs looking pale and exhausted. He rubbed his face and said, "That was probably Jenna." Apparently she was his ex. They'd broken up months earlier. She'd been trying to find him again. "She must have thought your door was mine," he said quietly. He apologized a few times before heading back upstairs. That explanation should have made me feel better. But later that afternoon, while I was taking out the trash, I noticed something strange near the back entrance of the house. Footprints, muddy ones. They started at the basement door. But they didn't lead away from it. They led toward it. And there were two different sets.